New Jersey, unfortunately, is not doing enough to help renters to make their homes more affordable. There are two key things that we would like to see the state do, and one of them is very, very important. We recently reviewed the governor's budget and found that they are proposing a cut of $2.5 million in state rental assistance program funding due to program trends, is the language in the budget. I'm not sure what program they're watching. It's not the same program the rest of us are watching. The trend for state rental assistance is that we need more and not less of it, and so it's disturbing that they will be cutting rental assistance when New Jersey continues to rank at the top of the least affordable places to live. We live in one of the richest states in the country, and we should be able to make sure everybody has a safe and decent place to live. That's why we're asking the federal government to come up with more money for renters as a result of Superstorm Sandy. We know that people were displaced both from their homes and their jobs, and so if their jobs were shut down, they couldn't afford to keep living here, and if their homes were damaged, they couldn't afford to find somewhere else to live. I actually just left a meeting of community organizations and private sector folks and other nonprofits and government agencies. We're talking about somewhere between 3,000 and 14,000 people who still need housing solutions in this area, well, around the state, but particularly focused on this area. So we know that your story is not the only one like it, and we appreciate you sharing it today, because we know that takes courage and guts, and we're all pulling for you to get to where you need to be so that you don't have to be back here, except with a success story next year. Because we know the data's not going to go away. This is a problem across the country. It is particularly difficult here in this region and in this state. So in addition to asking the state to not cut back on rental assistance vouchers, which would clearly help folks in Vicky's situation, we also want to make sure that the federal government is doing what it needs to do to provide a fair amount of resources for folks recovering from Sandy. About 40% of the people impacted by Superstorm Sandy were renters, and of the 40%, about 66% of those, more than 2/3, earn less than $30,000 a year. They're talking about folks living paycheck to paycheck, minimum wage if they can get it, with really no direct resources. The only programs that the federal government approved that the state applied for were subsidies to landlords and the creation of new affordable homes. It would be great for us to have more affordable rental apartments that people can find that are close to where they work so that they can get there. And those programs have been somewhat successful, although some of them have not been as close to damaged areas as need to be. So they need to really focus, the state and the federal government needs to really focus on creating more rental homes people can afford and using that Sandy funding to design those programs and those developments in impacted areas proportional to damage, but also making sure that there's direct assistance to Sandy survivors who need rental help. So we've asked for $60 million in the next tranche to be dedicated directly to rental assistance, which would go a long way to helping people find an apartment or be able to afford an apartment. Finding an apartment, as Donna pointed out, is its own separate challenge, because even if you can afford one, you might not be able to find one because the vacancy rate is so low here because of this storm, and because the state is taking a very long time to address home ownership rebuilding in the storm. You have people who are in the rental market who never were renters before, and when you had a very small supply and that demand goes out of control, you have a really big problem, because you have more people at the higher end who can afford to pay more, not usurping, but taking up apartments that might otherwise be available to lower income folks. So it's a compounded problem. It's a technical term, it's double whammy, and we want to make sure that there's enough resources on both ends so that homeowners can get back into their homes, and that would remove some of the pressure off the rental market, but also make sure that those homes stay affordable. New Jersey can take a better approach to dealing with vacant and foreclosed properties, make sure that those properties, if they're vacant and abandoned, get put back to productive use quickly. We have about 600,000 families that can't afford a safe, decent place to live, and we have lots and lots and lots of abandoned properties and lots of foreclosed properties. So if we had a production stream that took foreclosed and vacant properties and turned them into places people could live, we'd have more places for people to live, and we would have less stories like Vicky's. And that's really what we need our elected officials to focus on.